and welcome to the Mind Muse podcast. I'm your host, Christy Turley, and today Karith Foster joins me. We'll be talking about how to be funny even if you don't think you're funny, and why Karith believes that if you can laugh at it, you can get through it. We'll also talk about our struggles with perfectionism and how to flip the script on that to have more peace and happiness. And Karith actually has a new book out called You Can Be Perfect or You Can Be Happy. It's a lovely title. We'll also touch on diversity and her new word inversity to change the conversation around how this is taught, although we won't go in depth until the next episode. We have a part 2 coming out in a couple of days. So Karith Foster is a speaker, humorist, TV and radio personality, author, entrepreneur, wife, and mother. And she is a diversity engagement specialist. She's also a comedian, and a very funny one at that. She has signature programs that are impacting lives at academic institutions, organizations, and corporations across America in a time when humor and understanding and acceptance are so desperately needed. So let's go ahead and dive into today's episode. Hi, Karith. Welcome to the show.
Well, hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So we're going to be talking about a lot of fun things today about how to be funny, even if you don't think you're funny, and really how to lighten up. Times are different right now. There's a lot of upheaval personally, professionally, globally, and this is definitely a message that we can all use right now. So, and you just had a book come out, You Can Be Perfect or You Can Be Happy, which is an awesome title.
Thank you so much. I think that so many of us are striving to live perfect lives, be perfect people, the perfect friend, the perfect spouse, the perfect mom, the perfect child. And there's no such thing as perfection. Yet we've been kind of duped into thinking that if I just work hard enough, or if I just do this, I'll get there. And it's an illusion, but happiness is not. And while happiness is as individual as we are, there is also it's attainable. Now the caveat is happiness is not a constant, and that's okay too. It is okay to have bad days. It is okay to want to stay in bed for a day or a weekend. 3 weeks, you should probably talk to someone, right? And so the idea behind You Can Be Perfect, You Can Be Happy is just basically giving people permission to be human and fallible, and understand that, striving for perfection can cost you. It can cost you joy, peace, and happiness.
Yeah, I'm a reforming perfectionist myself. So you're speaking my language. I'm working on it, right? Practice
We all
makes
are. We
perfect.
all are. This book is almost really more of a note to self.
Yeah. Yeah, seriously. So, you're a comedian. You're a keynoter who integrates a lot of humor. So, how can we use why humor, and why would it be important to want to use that as a tool on our tool belt in business?
Absolutely. I think everybody remembers their favorite teacher or professor, and they were the people who incorporated humor into the lessons. And through that, you were more engaged, you retained more. And I think the same applies to when you are a speaker or a presenter or a leader in an organization. And you can use humor to engage people, but also it sets a tone that's almost magical. You know what I mean? Because it helps people put their defenses down. It neutralizes a space so that if you're going to be covering an uncomfortable or difficult topic like diversity and inclusion, as a big topic of dialogue right now, it creates a space for people to be able to come um, with open ears, not necessarily ready to have an argument or to, again, like, be on the defensive. Humor is such an incredible tool, and why I appreciate comedy and comedians is because we're the truth tellers, and this goes as far back as, before Shakespeare. But if you think about even Shakespeare's time, in his plays, he and the court jesters were the only people allowed to poke fun at the king without being tried for treason and being beheaded. So there is this way to weave the truth into comedy to get people to go, oh yeah, I never thought about it that way, or say things that some people either are afraid to say or haven't thought about in a certain way. And I was a fan of stand-up comedy before I became one, because I was in awe of people who had the gift of being able to take something really, really complex and break it down, right? Or really simple and extrapolate on it and take it to a whole other level. I thought that there was a genius to that. And there's a genius in that, and there's a gift in that, because what comedy does is it's a unifier. It's a great unifier to get people to laugh at the same thing. People who come from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic statuses, different ethnicities, and to be able to create a commonality under the umbrella of humor is such a powerful thing. And you don't have to be a stand-up comedian to use humor. It certainly helps. But there are ways to go about finding humor. And when we talk about self-deprecating humor, I don't like rip myself apart or oh, like I'm not like a Rodney Dangerfield to myself. But it's very personal, and I think we can open up that way and kind of show that you don't take yourself so seriously. It lets other people not take themselves as seriously, and we can all kind of be on this playing field as these wonderful, fallible, imperfect humans.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And it brings me back to that title of your book. You can be perfect or you can be happy. And when people can be vulnerable and authentic and say, look, I'm flawed a little here. I have these great strengths, but I'm a little flawed right here. It takes a lot of pressure off of you as well as everyone else there. And all of a sudden, you can have a more constructive company meeting with ideas that people aren't afraid to share. So, yeah, you raise a great point. Now, I would love for you to dive a little deeper on something before we can go into the how to be funny part,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of tension right now in the air, and you talk a lot about diversity. So how so many people don't even know what to say, and then people kind of like get upset at the people who are silent, but they really don't know what to say.
Right.
So being funny seems like the last thing you would want to do on such a sensitive subject. So how would you advise that? How do you use it when you're teaching in corporate environments? What do you say to that?
Excellent questions. I mean, this is why you do what you do, right? I think the number one rule in comedy is be funny, right? And then the second rule is know your audience. And that is something that comes from having an emotional intelligence that not everybody has, but that doesn't mean you can't strengthen it. Okay. So when I speak on the topics of diversity and inclusion, I actually am looking to revamp the whole way we have that conversation, because I personally don't believe that it's been done well. If it had, we would be in a much different place than we are now. So I coined and trademarked the term inversity.
Hmm.
And inversity is still a nod to the acknowledging and respecting our differences and what sets us apart. Like, that would be insane to try to skip over or ignore, but instead shifting the focus from what separates and divides us to what do we have in common? How can we be truly inclusive of one another? But most importantly, introspective, right? Meaning understanding your value, your worth, your connection to humanity. Because if you can see that in yourself, then you can see it in someone else. And I feel like we've been working from the outside in for so long, and now we have to work from the inside out. And that is what's going to change things. And part of the methodology I use is a system called CARE. I want people to start caring about themselves and each other. But CARE is an acronym for conscious empathy, active listening, responsible reactions, and environmental awareness. And when you can apply those things, you can have the conversations that are uncomfortable, but not necessarily painful. And we are in a place and a time where a lot of people, they don't know what to say. I likened it to um, there's a story, and I don't know if it's a fable, but it seems to kind of make sense. When the Americas were first settled by the Europeans, the indigenous people who were there, they couldn't see the ships. They couldn't see that. It was still beyond their scope of cognition. They physically could not see the ships arriving on the shore. They saw the people. So it's almost like this magic trick, right?
Mhm.
And I feel like that's kind of what racism is right now for a lot of people who've never experienced it. A lot of people now, they see the ships and they don't know how to deal with it, and because it's terrifying. And you're like kind of caught in this place of, I don't want to say the right thing, wrong thing. I want to do the right thing. What do I do? And this is where the caring comes in, the conscious empathy, not to be confused with sympathy. Sympathy is when you feel bad for someone. Empathy is when you put yourself in their shoes. Conscious empathy is empathy on steroids, right? Where you ask two main questions: what is it like for them, and how must that feel? And it's not just a two-way street. This is a 6-lane highway. So it's going to take some effort and some energy and some patience and some maturity. But asking, what is it like to be someone who is the only Black person in the office? What is it like to be someone who wears their religion, in their wardrobe? What is it like to be a white person who didn't grow up around anybody but white people and doesn't know the right thing to say or questions to ask and doesn't want to be accused of microaggressions? And then there's the active listening. It's not what you say, but how you say it. We know that expression. But sometimes it's not what you hear, but how you interpret it, which is why we have to be curious. We have to ask questions. We have to, if somebody says something, we're not sure if it was the right thing to say, you say, well, what did you mean by that? Where did you get that information? How did that come to be part of your purview? And that's how you create a dialogue, which is what we need right now more than anything. We don't need people to back into a corner and say, oh, this is too uncomfortable. We don't need people to say, you know what, I'm tired of explaining this. I've said this over. No, we need people to sit together, have an open exchange, and not, I mean, listen, these are very tense times with very raw feelings, but we have to understand that we have to kind of step past that if we want to move forward.
That is so well said. And what an awesome acronym, and I totally agree. It's about feeling united and showing our love, showing that we care. And that love is what unites us. That's what runs through all of us as humanity. So, so very well said. Do you want to talk a little bit about your story and how you got to do what you do?
Sure. I grew up in a suburb of Plano, Texas, where I was the only one. I was the only Black person in any of my classes. And that became my normal. I didn't know anything different. And I think everybody comes from their prism of normal. It wasn't until I went to DC, I did an internship in college, and then, studied abroad in England and lived in New York. And I was exposed to all these different cultures and languages and people and ethnicities. And I realized, we aren't that different. First of all, we have more in common than we don't, and we all just want the same things: to feel worthy, to be loved, and to be heard. And I started as a journalist. I call myself a recovered journalist. That's what I have my degree in. And I moved to New York, basically out of school, to work for The View, because I thought, who better to learn from than Barbara Walters, the queen herself. And that kind of became my Devil Wears Prada. A million girls would kill for this job. Why are you miserable? And it's because while I was behind the scenes, and I did glean a lot from that, I learned how to produce and book and write. I missed having that voice. I missed being in front of people. And while I was there, I found stand-up comedy, or well, it found me. And I treated myself to a stand-up comedy class because I just needed an outlet for expression. And I realized that stand-up was really what I was wanting to do the whole time. Even though I was never the class clown, I was kind of the straight A, goody two-shoes student. What I found was, it was what I'd wanted to do with journalism in the first place, which was be this beacon of light and truth. But I wanted another element to it, and that was the healing factor. I wanted to promote unity. I wanted to show people that, gosh, life is tough, but we got this. And that's what comedy allowed me to do. And it was an incredible vehicle for, not just self-expression, but to, get people to laugh, think, and grow. I mean, that's my motto: laugh, think, grow. And I do believe if you can laugh at something, you can get through it. If you really look at comedy, so much of it is based on painful experiences, things that are tough. And I really, truly, what comics provide in the way of healing is, I think, such a phenomenal thing. And again, you don't have to be a stand-up to be able to find the funny in things. Now, you do have to, again, know your audience, have a gauge on what is appropriate and what isn't. Think about what you say before you say it, like anything, truly, is this going to come out the right way? There's never, it's never a good time when someone says, I don't mean to be offensive, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
something
yeah,
offensive is coming.
The Office, with Michael Scott comes to mind.
Right,
They
right.
always seem to say the wrong thing. Yes,
Um,
that's why we love that show.
Exactly. And I mean, and that's where the joking about yourself. So it's not like you're putting it on someone else, you're not attacking someone else, you're making fun of an experience that happened to you. Um, you know, I have a joke about, going up and down with my weight and my size. And it's truly a joke just about me. And I joke about how where I am geographically dictates how other people see me. Like in New York City, I'm pleasantly plump, right? But in LA, I'm a beached whale. But when I go back to Missouri, where I went to school, I'm anorexic. And it is awesome. So anybody having a fat day, you get yourself a one-way ticket to Kansas City and you will be
It's all relative, right?
all relative. And it's a joke. I mean, it's
Yeah.
truly just a joke. Obviously, there are big, small, tiny people, everywhere. And it's not about a personal attack. It's just about me joking about myself and just trying to bring light to some situations and talking about how when we do stereotype, what that does to other people and ourselves. And I use that to kind of make a point. And hopefully most people get it. They understand it's certainly not a personal attack or, addressing anybody who has, eating disorders or that kind of thing. But it's, we have to find the humor in things. If we do not let humor in our lives, we are doomed because good Lord, there is enough bad, awful stuff going on in the world. If we can't find a way to laugh, we're in trouble.
So true. Well, and that joke is actually, there's a deeper meaning even there because it shows us how distorted our thinking can become because of our perspective. And if we can change our perspective, or like you were saying before, using empathy to think from someone else's perspective and feel into that, then all of a sudden our how we see things change, not because the things that we're looking at changed.
Exactly.
So yeah, I love that. So comedy comes from pain. So knowing that, it all of a sudden seems easier to learn how to be funny.
Yeah.
Can you break it down? Like how can someone who doesn't even think they're funny, how can they learn to be funny? Can it be taught?
Absolutely. I mean, there are comedy classes all around the country. And I think, like I said, it kind of comes from pain points. Some things you don't even realize that were hard. I often joke, having been in the entertainment industry, about not being considered Black enough, right? Because there's a stereotype of what a typical African American woman should sound like, or look like, or act like. And when I was in entertainment, where they very much like to put you in a category, siphon you into a pigeonhole, I would go out for these auditions. And they would all be for African American roles, which, duh, hello, that's me. But I'd get there and I would speak with this voice, and they would say, um, can you jazz it up a little? Because they couldn't say, Karith, what we need you to do is sound blacker, right? We're too politically correct for that. So instead, I actually said once, so you want me to scat? Um, one woman goes, oh no, you don't seem to understand. What we're going for is an urban sound. Can you do that? I was like, I can do suburban for you. I'm from Plano, Texas. That's the best I can do. And so using my personal experiences of discomfort, right? Of pain, finding the light in it. If we think back to the sitcoms, right, of the 80s and the early 90s, some of the funniest episodes were around funerals, right? I mean, what could be less funny than death? But there's something to that. There's a healing and a catharsis in pointing out the absurdity of things and the pain and kind of flipping the switch on it. So I think to people who are like, oh, well, I don't have anything funny happening in my life. Actually, I'm sure there are some things that if you think about, it kind of tickles you, and if it makes you laugh, odds are it'll probably make somebody else laugh. And it's way safer to talk about yourself than anyone else, because especially if you're in a position of power or you don't want HR coming down on you. But I think there's so many things that are universal, like marriage and kids, and yes, talking about our diets that have failed. COVID-19, I think they called it 19 because that's how many pounds people gain since we've been quarantined.
Yep, the quarantine 19. Yes,
You
instead
know,
of the freshman 15, totally.
Exactly. So I don't, I'm not saying go out and try to be a stand-up comic, but I am saying just look for the humor in the little things. And if it tickles you, like I said, odds are it'll tickle somebody else.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, and also giving yourself permission to really reflect upon life as well, and not just take it as it comes and feel some kind of emotion, but actually you're talking about transforming the emotion of fear or worry or some of these more painful emotions into something a lot lighter. How many of us grew up, don't be so serious, hearing that. And we're probably the ones that can use humor the most, right?
Without question.
And actually, those are probably the same people that are perfectionists.
I was just gonna say you were literally talking about stuff that's in my book right now. I call it getting back to the basics, and that's an acronym for several different principles that people can apply. And one of the B's is be present. Just be present. Be present with what you're feeling. Be present with what's going on around you. Don't go into the past thinking, oh, I should have said this. I should have. I mean, I know that as a perfectionist, recovering perfectionist, I have laid awake nights thinking about counter arguments to stuff that happened in college. You know what I mean?
Totally. Ruminating.
Right? Like, what good does that do? How is that helping anyone? I am just losing sleep. But being present, and that also means like, don't go too far in the future. Like, you're never going to be in the future. You're only right here, right now. And being present, like you said, I really want to honor what you just said as far as, if you're not feeling it, if you're having a bad day, we in Western society so badly want to skip over the bad stuff, right? We do not grieve properly like we should. And this is, since coronavirus and this new this division that we're seeing amongst people based on our race and ethnicities. And by the way, I hate saying race because we're only one race, the human race, but you know what I mean.
Agreed.
um
Yeah.
it's uncomfortable, and so people want to fast forward and skip over it. No, sit with that for a moment, be present in that so that you can feel it fully and start to heal. We recently rescued some baby bunnies in our backyard, and unfortunately, nature got to them and took its course. We tried to, let them do their thing, but our last one passed away, and that was the one we gotten really attached to. And we were feeding and nurturing, and had grown. Its little ears had popped up, its eyes had opened. And my daughter, who's 7, she's like, "Mommy, I don't want to be sad about this." And I said, "You know what? It's okay to be sad about this. We have to be sad sometimes, because that's how we heal. That's how we grow. It's okay to grieve. I don't want you to skip over that because you don't like how it feels." And we had a really nice, beautiful conversation about it. And the same goes for adults. Yeah, we don't like to be sad. We don't like to be scared. We don't like to feel helpless, which is what so many people feel right now, wherever you stand. This is not a political thing. This is not an ethnic thing. This is not a religious thing or gender thing. Like, everybody right now feels a little helpless. And it's okay to feel that way right now. And then you sit with it and you start to take action, whether it's having conversations, reading articles, stepping a little outside of your comfort zone so you can see how to mend things for yourself and for others.
Yeah, I agree. And it takes humility because a lot of us are considered to be experts. So, how dare we not know the answer? And this is an unprecedented time. It's going to take an unprecedented amount of creativity to see our way through, and also introspection and reflection. So, um, yeah, you're right on, and feel how you're going to feel, and connection, I would say too. It goes back to the point of being united, reaching out, being vulnerable, not worrying about how you might look, because maybe you don't know this one answer, because probably someone else does, and can really help you through it. So yeah, it's really, really great. So, and I like how you say too, if you can laugh at it, you can get through it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, we are not perfect, obviously. That's why the book is you can be perfect, you can be happy. Not really an option. But we can still, find things that amuse us and laugh at our fallible qualities. Laugh at the fact that, what, I didn't nail it. That's one of my favorite shows is Nailed It, and this is a baking show where people just destroy their creations, not intentionally. They're trying the best they can, but they're making fun of it. And that's what we should do, and not taking ourselves so seriously all the time. I think that's really where we have to start coming from right now, and just understanding that I'm not perfect, you're not perfect, nobody is perfect. And so to expect that, not just from ourselves, but from other people, like that's a pretty high bar.
Yeah, and I love how you've shared how you use humor to really discuss things that normally people wouldn't want to discuss because it's so taboo. And humor's like the gateway to be able to talk about those subjects. Um, do you mind giving us an example, or tell another joke, or illustrate this in some way? Maybe you have a story. I'm putting you on the spot, Miss
That's all
Stand-up
right.
comedian.
That's all right. I'll take it. As I take a sip of water. Yeah,
Yes,
I'm
as she
prepared.
sips of water nervously, try to figure out what she's going to say. No, I'm just kidding.
No, it's all
You're a
good.
pro.
So, as far as using humor, so I have this great story about my mom. And, since we're talking about, what's happening with the, racial tensions in America, my mom, she's just my hero in so many ways. And when we first moved to Texas from Denver, we were transferred here. My dad worked for IBM. And my mom, ended up putting us in private school, and we were doing this, that, and the other. And this was back in the day when people would solicit you and call your house and, hey, do you need this surface, carpet cleaning? Do you need, and there was a company, and we'll just say Sears because they're defunct and can't sue us, um, that was calling my mom to see if she needed, to have the carpets cleaned. And every time this woman called, it just wasn't the right time. But she and my mother developed a rapport. They would just, have a quick little chat. So we'll call her Nancy. Nancy knew after a time that, my father worked for IBM. She knew my mom had gone to Rutgers University, all of these things. And my mother sounds a lot like I do. So long story short, they finally agree on a date for these gentlemen to come and clean the carpet. And as they're about to hang up, Nancy says to my mom, Carol, just so you know, the men who are coming to clean your carpets are black. To which my mother, God love her, says, that's okay, Nancy. I sleep with a black man every night. And that's all she
That's
said.
awesome.
Classic.
Yeah, that's
No
awesome.
explanation, nothing. And the woman's like, well, they'll be there at 3, click. So there's
Yeah.
ways to find humor in uncomfortable things.
That is amazing. You just reminded me of something that I'm going to actually share this too, just to give one more example. But my husband and I struggled with infertility for 7 years, and we didn't actually have children until our 12th or 13th year of marriage. So, my husband comes from a very large family. He has cousins for days. Like, I remember early on in our marriage, it was difficult to keep them all straight because there's so many of them. So this meaning aunt comes up to us at a family event and says, "So, when are you going to have kids?" And Jared, just my husband, turns to her and says, "Well, we just really love practicing." And she just like turned red, didn't know what to say. Yeah, but we got pretty good at the little quips like that,
Right?
and maybe that was rude, I don't know, but it was just kind of a painful question for her to ask
Sure.
given the circumstances we were in, and she never asked again, thank
There
goodness.
you go. There you go. There you go.
Right or wrong, I mean,
But you know
that's
what?
how we
That's
dealt
the
with it.
thing. He handled it with humor. He kind of also put her in her place with doing that. And you kind of solved the problem. And it's a great cocktail story. You know what I mean? Like you get it's multifold.
Yeah, we can laugh at it now for sure. At the
Right.
time,
And that's the thing. Yeah. Sometimes it takes a little well, that's what they say the equation for comedy is, tragedy plus time equals comedy.
oh, I love that. That is a good quote. Like a writer downer.
Right,
That's
right.
amazing. Yeah. So, I wanted to ask you, how can people get a hold of you or learn more about you and kind of run through that? And then I'd like you to end off with our final note for the day, or your final thought or final nugget of wisdom.
Sure. So, fortunately, I have a very unique name, Karith. Karith. And maybe I'll come back one day and talk about how I got that name. But it's Karith Foster, and I can be found at karith.com. Not too many Kariths out there. And my handle is Karith Foster on LinkedIn, on Twitter, Instagram. Now on Facebook, my professional page is Foster at Foster Karith. So you just juxtapose the names. But otherwise, yeah, they're not. You can just pretty much Google Karith and you'll find me.
And I'll be sure to put those links in the show notes as well for people.
Thank you. And oh, I would love to share that my book is available on Amazon. You can be perfect or you can be happy, either the Kindle version or the physical copy.
Awesome. Okay, and your final thought.
I have hope. I have hope for humanity. I have hope for America as a nation. And I think that so much of it starts with being kind, not just to others, but to ourselves. We don't need to be so hard on ourselves right now when we're dealing with a lot of stresses, with a lot of grief, with a lot of loss. We need to show ourselves love and kindness. And through that, we'll be able to extend that to others.